Hello, welcome to our lesson on muscle tissue. For this lesson, we're going to focus on the characteristics of muscle tissues. And we're going to focus primarily on skeletal muscle, but we're going to touch on cardiac and smooth as well. So, I guess I gave it away. There's three kinds of muscle tissue. There's skeletal muscle. The skeletal muscle, like your deltoid here, is attached to your bones. Remember all those 5 billion landmarks we had to learn? Well, about half of them are sites of muscle attachment. So skeletal muscle is attached to bone, and it's voluntary. And look, it has this nice banding pattern on it. Now we have cardiac muscle. It's only in the heart. Oh, look, it has the banding pattern too, but the cells look different. These cells look like they go in straight lines, or these cells look like they're branching out. We have smooth muscle. It doesn't have the banding pattern. It actually has these small fistiform cells. Fistiform means tapered at the ends. And it's found in walls of hollow organs. It's found in your iris, your retrocapillary smooth muscle. So we're going to learn about the characteristics of all these muscles. But first, we need to talk about characteristics of muscle in general. So you will be able to tell me the 4 properties of muscle tissue. Muscle tissue has 4 properties. All muscle tissue is excitable. That means you give it an electrical stimulus right there, it contracts. Physiology in undergrad used to be, let's play with frogs, let's touch them with electrodes and see what happens. The last time I did the experimental setup and to make sure it worked, we had a bullfrog. His name was Jeremiah. We stimulated his hamstring, and he won. He broke the setup. That's not why the school stopped using it. Contractibility. When you excite it, it contracts. So see, this muscle shortened in length. So muscle shortens when it contracts. It's elastic. Yoga, think about that. You're stretching a fiber. It can return to its initial length, and it can actually go past that. So elasticity means it can return to its original length. Extendability means it could go beyond that. So these are 2 things you're doing when you're doing yoga. So, what are the functions of muscle tissue? To move things. So, it produces body movements. It stabilizes body position. I have good posture exactly 2 times every year. When I give this lecture, when I come to this slide, I'm like, oh, I have horrible posture. Regulating organ volumes, like your stomach or your bladder. Movement of substances within a body. We'll talk about that when we get to digestion and lymphatics and circulation. Producing heat, shivering. So, there used to also be vocalization on that slide. I have no idea where it went. There's 3 kinds of muscle tissue. In a face-to-face class, I ask students to pause and look at the 3 types of muscle tissue and see how they would explain these things. So, smooth muscle, the one that I yawn at, it's actually really exciting. There's at least 5 different subtypes of it. It's these boring-looking tapered cells. And it doesn't have this banding. So we have this banding pattern here. We have a banding pattern there, no banding pattern. So small cells, no banding. What about cardiac muscle? What comes out? What's the first thing that stands out in your mind? To me, it's these things. Those are called intercalated discs. And we should be able to see a banding pattern. This book failed in the diagram, but I wanted it because it shows the 3 subtypes. And then here, the cells are parallel. And which one has the most nucleuses? You can't really tell. This is much zoomed in. The cardiac muscle is more zoomed in than this. This has lots and lots of nuclei. This has 1 nuclei per cell. So let's talk about the muscle tissues. You are going to have to identify the histology in lab, and you have to tell me unique characteristics in both lab and lecture. You are going to be able to compare and contrast the muscles. Usually it's an essay question. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with you guys. And you'll identify which types of muscles have which characteristics. So, skeletal muscle. What do you notice about skeletal muscle? The first thing that I notice, it has a banding pattern. Dark, light, dark, light. dark light, and that is called striations. It's also long parallel cells, and the nuclei are on the outside. That's called peripheral nuclei. And anything else you notice? Wow, that cell has at least 2 nuclei in this little tiny segment. At least 2 nuclei there. Oh my goodness, look at all those nuclei. It is multinucleated. Skeletal muscle is long cylindrical cells with many peripheral nuclei. Visible banding pattern called striations. And they're surrounded by bundles of connective tissue, like so. And there's often adipose. When you go to the butcher and they're marveling at all the marbling in the meat, that's fat. So, remember what those characteristics were? Long, parallel cells. Remember that signal from sign when you took math? Multinucleated. And what else was there? Striated. So some characteristics. It's voluntary. You can control most skeletal muscles. Has a good supply of oxygen. And it's red in color due to myoglobin. So I added to this that it has myoglobin that stores oxygen and a good oxygen supply. It is voluntary. And lastly, it's attached by tendons and bone to bone or the skin. And it's arranged in antagonistic group. So think of your forearm, your biceps brachii will flex to make your arm go up. Your triceps brachii will extend to make your arm go back down. Cardiac muscle. Cells are small and branched, and they have these intercalated discs between them, like so. So small branch cells, intercalated discs, and that's a combination desmosome, which is holding it together because of stress, and gap junctions. So whenever you see a histology slide, look for these intercalated discs. As you can see, it has the same banding pattern, and that is called striations. So small branch cells, typically one nucleus, technically 1 or 2. I'm beginning to believe the 2 nucleuses in the more histology slides I look at, but I swear all the pictures look like 1. So my computer just burped. I might be repeating myself right here. So skeletal muscle, long parallel cells, many nuclei, voluntary, and attached to bone or skin. Cardiac and skeletal muscle, striated, has myoglobin and a good oxygen supply. Cardiac muscle is in the heart and has short branch cells with only 1 nuclei. And it has the intercalated discs which attach the cells together, which is a combination desmosome and gap junction. That gap junction is going to be very important when you get to physiology, because calcium can actually move from one cell to the other cell, and it lets the heart contract all at once. And one more characteristic on that slide was it's striated. Oh, I wrote striated. So I'm too lazy to write it again, so let's just do a blob, like so. And let's make sure we know that's included in that blob. Uh-oh, what the heck are these blobs? So that must mean my next slide's going to say it has myoglobin and a good oxygen supply. Well, let's find out. So, cardiac muscle. It's going to be involuntary. I forgot to write voluntary, remind me to do that. For skeletal muscle, you cannot tell it to beat. You could do breathing to slow it down and speed it up, but it is autorhythmic, which means it beats on its own. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, the witch doctor pulled out the person's heart and it was still beating. Yes, if you were able to pull out a heart without killing the person, it would continue to beat. There actually used to be a cool YouTube video of a human heart in transport, and it was beating, and yeah, that sort of violated all sorts of agreements. And it functions to pump blood. So I've added to this autorhythmic, beats on its own. Involuntary, you can't tell it to beat. And it pumps blood. Lastly, smooth muscle. It looks boring, but it's not. Smooth muscle is a spindle-shaped cell that's technically called fissiform with one central nucleus. Cardiac muscle could have 1 to 2. This is always 1. It is non-striated. It looks like it's boring, but it actually has the same proteins for contraction. Those are actin and myosin. It's just arranged differently so you don't see this banding pattern. Now, it's involuntary. Some of it could be autorhythmic, some of it can't. We're not going to worry about the difference between the two. Cells, 1 nucleus, non-striated, involuntary, and autorhythmic. So we have our Venn blob right here showing what is shared for each of the muscle. So cardiac and smooth muscles share autorhythmic and involuntary. Cardiac and skeletal share myoglobin, good oxygen, striated, and they all share actin and myosin. Unique characteristics: skeletal long parallel nucleuses, many nuclei, voluntary attached skin or bone. Cardiac muscles in the heart, short branch cells, 1 to 2 nuclei, and smooth muscle, spindle-shaped cells, 1 nucleus, and striated. So smooth muscle lines tubes of the body. It's in the hollow organ like the stomach and the bladder. Attached to hair follicles, it's in the iris. So, why did I do that Venn blob? Well, on the test, I'm going to ask you what are characteristics of these. So something like this. Which one is striated, branched, 1 nucleus, and joined by intercalated discs? That would be cardiac. Next question. Which muscle type or types can be autorhythmic? That is all skeletal, cannot be autorhythmic, so bye-bye skeletals. Well, it's actually F, both cardiac and smooth. I can have choice F on your test. Which type or types is non-striated? Well, that's our boring smooth muscle. Which type or types have to have direct nerve stimulation? Well, cardiac and smooth could be autorhythmic, which means it beats on its own. So that must mean, so all those are gone. Process of elimination, it is skeletal. So that one's making you think. Which one is involuntary, or which ones? That'd be cardiac and smooth. True or false? Because smooth muscle is non-striated, it lacks contractile components. That is false. All 3 have actin and myosin. So that's how I'm going to test you on this. I'm going to give you characteristics of the muscles. You have to tell me which one it is. Thank you.